In the quiet corners of a bustling pub, a tale unfolded that would shatter the very essence of trust and love. A story so entwined with deceit and desire, it beckoned the question, how well do we truly know those closest to us? Join us as we delve into a narrative that will leave you questioning the shadows that lie beneath the surface of everyday relationships. I can't tell my children about this just yet, because I know it will shatter them, and I don't want them to see their mother in this light right now. They do not deserve that. I'll attempt to write as much as I can before going to bed. I'm simply sitting in bed in the dark, jotting this down while it's still fresh. I can't believe this is actually happening to me. We're all in so much pain right now. My wife, Emily, died from cancer just this week. We were married for 30 years. We were married right after high school. We were high school sweethearts. She actually resided on the farm next to me. We resided in a little country town, growing up. Her dad and my dad were best friends. We shared so many experiences as kids, such as playing in the fields, having large family dinners with her and my families, and fishing in the creek below our house. We went to school together, married, and raised our own children. She was my rock and companion in every meaning of the word. She was diagnosed with lung cancer 15 months ago. It appeared out of nowhere. She was a runner. She never smoked or drank. She was fit. She ate healthily. There was no history of it in her family. It just felt like a fluke. She first complained of a minor cough that was persistent. She had been sick for nearly 2 months when I eventually persuaded her to see a doctor, even if it was just for antibiotics or an inhaler. Then we received the diagnosis. I am really torn right now. While I was cleaning up and searching through old photos for a celebration of life, I came into a box among her shoes and wardrobe, containing a collection of her journals, old receipts, letters, hotel keys, pressed flowers, underwear, and other items. After searching through her journals and letters, I discovered that she was having an affair with a man she had worked with at the hospital. My wife was a nurse who was committed to helping others while covertly destroying my heart. I discovered that Emily was having an affair with a man named Mark, whom she had worked with at the hospital. My wife was a nurse who was committed to helping others while covertly destroying my heart. She had left work shortly after being diagnosed. The house felt incredibly empty without her laughter and presence. Even after discovering this box today, I found myself roaming about the home, feeling the things she used to touch, attempting to cling on to the remains of her existence. Right now, I find it most difficult to be in the kitchen. It was her domain. She enjoyed cooking and baking, and the aroma of her cinnamon buns always made our home feel cozy and welcoming. Now it feels like a hollow shell of what it once was. It gets even worse. I realized that I never knew the woman whose hand I had held as she breathed her last. I don't know how to proceed from here. The children, Lucas and Olivia, have been incredibly strong. They're trying to keep it together, probably for my sake as much as theirs. But I can see the pain in their eyes. They had lost their mother, who was their confidant and closest supporter. I'm frightened of how her death and the truth will affect their lives. I want to be strong for them, but I think I'm failing. Should I tell them to sit with this? I wish I hadn't found that box. I want to burn it. I can see Emily everywhere I look, her preferred chair in the living room, the garden she attended with great devotion, the photo albums that appear to be unusually well kept. It's a continuous reminder of the life we created together. How could she have kept this hidden for so long? By the dates in the journal and the letters, it appears she has been having this affair for about 10 years. She was my one and only. How could she have done this to me? Why did she leave that box hidden in plain sight? Did she want me to find it? Was it some strange way for her to unburden herself, even after she had passed away? These questions torment me, and I will never get the answers I seek. I feel cheated not only by her behavior but also by her appearance. The love I believed we shared now seems soiled, overwhelmed by deception. It's difficult to reconcile the compassionate and nurturing person with the one who kept so much of her life hidden from me. I wish I could talk with her, ask her why, understand what caused this. Was there something missing from our marriage that I didn't notice? Did she ever consider stopping the affair, or did she believe she could continue with both lives indefinitely? These thoughts keep me awake at night. Despite everything, I still love her. That's the hardest part. Love does not simply fade because of betrayal, it is now mixed with rage, grief, and perplexity. I miss her even as I struggle with this new perspective of who she was. Writing it down helps, even if it's just a little. It helps me handle the immense pain and betrayal that seems like it's strangling me. I know I'll have to tell the kids eventually, share the intensity of my pain with them, and show them that it is acceptable to grieve and be vulnerable. For the time being, however, I must forge my own path through this darkness. I don't want to bother them with this, they have their own lives and children to raise and cherish. Thank you for listening. I'm not sure who will read this, but knowing that I put these feelings into words and that they exist is a tiny relief. Maybe one day when I'm ready, I'll share this with the kids so they understand a little better what their father is going through. I will continue with the next part of the text, adding punctuation and replacing names as requested. Please wait for the subsequent output. Update 1. Thank you so much for your nice thoughts and remarks to help me through this. I never imagined anyone would listen or care, and many of you made me realize something, and I thank you for it. It's been a few weeks since my last post, and I wanted to provide an update on how things are going. First, I chose not to trash the box. I keep it in a safe location out of sight, but accessible when I'm ready to handle more of it. I've also started talking to a few close friends about what I've discovered, friends who do not know her well or are too close to her family. I trust them, their help and insights have been helpful. It has helped me see that while her actions were treachery, they do not erase the happy times we shared or the love she had for our family. People and relationships are extremely complex. I'm starting to get it now. The children still don't know. I have opted to hide this information from them for the time being. They're dealing with enough loss as it is, and I want their memories of their mother to be untarnished for the moment. We've spent a lot of time together and relied on one another for support. It has brought us closer together, and I am grateful for that. The counselor has been a great help. We've been working through my feelings of betrayal and sadness, which is a slow but necessary process. I'm learning to forgive not only her but also myself for not recognizing the signs and not being flawless. Forgiveness is a journey, and I am taking it one step at a time. One of the most difficult things has been learning to distinguish the lady I loved from the woman who made a terrible, gut-wrenching mistake. I've realized that she was both. She was a great mother and loyal lover, but she also made decisions that deeply damaged me. Holding these realities together is tough, but it is an essential part of the healing process. For the time being, I still have a lot of questions, and when I'm ready, I'll contact whoever it was she was having an affair with and try to obtain the answers I need. I've been trying to keep strong for the children. They wanted to honor her memory as a family. We've created a tiny garden in her favorite area in the backyard, complete with her favorite flowers. The kids and I take turns tending to it, and it has become a source of comfort and remembrance for them. I'm really trying not to get bitter and resentful, so that's all I have for now. Sorry for the lack of an update. However, some of you have asked about the letters and what she has written in her journals. This is difficult for me to talk about, but I believe it is necessary to discuss, if only to help me process and possibly help others who are going through a similar situation. When I first opened the letters and diaries, they shocked me. I felt as if I were intruding on something very intimate. I needed the truth. In her writing, she discussed her challenges, worries, and desires, particularly her longing for certain individuals with whom she worked. He appeared to be a hospital doctor, visiting from out of town, who gave her some attention and praised her intelligence and work ethic. She also expressed her affection for our family and commitment to her career. However, among those injuries were revelations of her infidelity. She recalled how it began innocently enough with shared shifts at the hospital, which evolved into coffee breaks, lunches, and finally something more. This killed me. She went into detail about their physical interactions and how he was beyond anything she had ever experienced before. She once said that I was pretty vanilla in comparison to the encounters she'd had with the other man. I will admit that I thought our sex life wasn't horrible, and perhaps I was mistaken all these years. We had sex on a regular basis, probably 2 or 3 times per week. She never faltered in the bedroom, she always seemed to be interested. In the diary, she had stated that she had a strong sex drive, and I assumed she was having interactions with the other man in the same week that we were. She was physically active on numerous occasions throughout the week, though not all of the time. She talked about her guilt and how she fought to reconcile her feelings for the other man with her love for me and her family. She looked to be divided between 2 universes. There were a few occasions when she considered stopping the romance. She stated he was fun, that he made her feel youthful, and that she had only ever had one relationship, and then it felt good to be wanted. Everything in this destroyed my heart. I used to spend weekends hunting or fishing with my mates. It became a sort of routine, and she indicated that she looked forward to that weekend every year because he would come over, and it would be a weekend of sex. I won't go into too much detail, but she mentioned that he was good with his hands. I believe you get the picture. It destroyed my ego. Update 3. I decided to approach this doctor fellow. It was not an easy decision, and I spent many sleepless hours debating if it was the proper thing to do. Finally, I recognized I needed the answers to move ahead. I went to the hospital where they worked. I assumed he was still there, and indeed, he was. I had him paged at the front desk, and when he came down the hall to see me, he grinned at me. He didn't know who I was, and for a little moment, I realized why she was focused on him. However, it wounded my heart even more. He inquired what I wanted, and I went outside and said, "You knew my wife," and then I noticed his expression shift, and it finally clicked. He handed me his card and said he was waiting for me. He said to call him and that he wanted to schedule a proper one-on-one conversation with me. So, we agreed on a time to go for coffee. When we sat down, he told me that my wife had mentioned me and the kids a lot. Again, this killed me to hear. I asked him why he prolonged the affair when he knew she was married. He stated that they loved each other. When I heard that, I almost stood up and left. I could not bear to hear it, but I stayed. I stayed because I wanted to understand how awful it was. He went on, emphasizing that what they had felt was sincere, even if it was incorrect. He explained that my wife had battled with the situation, split between her love for our family and her relationship with him. He did not attempt to excuse their behavior, but he did try to explain her mental suffering. I asked him whether he had ever considered terminating it, knowing how damaging it might be. He stated they had discussed it several times, but something kept them coming back to each other. He admitted that it was selfish, that they were caught up in their own feelings and couldn't see the wider picture. Listening to him was terrible, every statement felt like a stab to my heart. However, in an unusual way, it brought some clarity. It demonstrated to me that my wife was more than just the story's villain. She was a deeply flawed human being who made awful decisions based on complex emotions. He also discussed how it had altered her outlook on life and her regrets. He informed me that in her final months, she confided in him about her desire to put things right and her worry of leaving us all with unresolved anguish. He stated that she had said her farewell to him shortly after her diagnosis. He stated that she believed her sickness was payback for what she had done behind my family's back. Prior to our separation, I explained how much his actions had harmed me and my family. He apologized, not only for the affair itself, but also for the consequences. He pledged to remain away from my family to respect our recovery process. He apologized for our loss, saying he never intended to hurt me, but he did love her. And I told him that I too loved her and that I never wanted to see him again. Confronting him did not provide all of the answers or make things better, but it was a step toward closure that helped me see that the affair was a nuanced and multifaceted issue rather than a black and white betrayal. I will continue to see a therapist on a regular basis. It's one of the few things that has kept me grounded during this ordeal. The sessions provided me with a safe space to express my emotions and disentangle the web of grief, rage, and bewilderment that I am currently struggling with. The therapist has been quite helpful in helping me see things from multiple perspectives in order to process the betrayal without entirely overshadowing the positive memories I have of my wife. As for my children, I've decided to keep the affair hidden from them, at least for now. It's a difficult decision, and I fight with it every day, but I sincerely believe that is the proper thing to do. They're already dealing with the devastation of losing their mother. Adding the burden of her affair will only exacerbate their grief and uncertainty. They must remember her as the caring, dedicated mother she was to them. I want their memories of Mom to be filled with warmth and affection, not tainted by her faults. They do not deserve to have their perception of her tainted at such a sensitive moment. The therapist agrees with this decision. We've discussed a lot about the potential impact on the kids, and we both feel that disclosing this knowledge now would cause more harm than good. And I hope that in time, I can reconcile the lady I thought I knew with the one who made these decisions. For the time being, I'll continue to see a therapist and take things slowly. First and foremost, I extend my heartfelt condolences, and secondly, if any of your wives had a secret life concealed in your closet, that would be some serious treachery. Her preferred concealing places were journals, receipts, hotel keys, and underpants. That's a scavenger quest. So the wife was having sex while he was away on hunting expeditions, and he was talking about multitasking. It was as if she were running your own small bed and breakfast, but instead of breakfast, she served treachery with a side of shame. And finding out that the guy at the hospital has no idea what is going on, that's classic sitcom material right there. I can just imagine the awkward small chat over coffee, like, "Hey, remember when you ruined my life?" Awkward. And then confront the other man. That requires some major courage. Though I'm curious, what kind of coffee do you get when you're sitting down with the man who made your wife right? He was skilled with his hands, probably not decaf for sure. Here is the next story. My fiancé had lost his job, so I went on a date with another man. Now everything is ruined. My arrogance and pride have cost me dearly in this life. I'd always been warned about it, but I had no idea it would lose me my girlfriend and the opportunity to marry into a lifetime of happiness. This was all because I believed I was the superior person, but my fiancé had taught me a significant lesson. Pride definitely does come before a fall, and my fall was tremendous. I always assumed I was on top of the world, you know, the beginning of every phrase, being the only girl who my parents spoiled beyond belief. I expected everyone else to do the same. I grew up with everyone at my beck and call. Do not blame me for it, guys. Anyway, that influenced how I grew up and perceived the world. I was feeling hot inside. Who wouldn't want to do what I said? Absolutely no one. No one could tell me what to do either. That's what I told my fiancé after he warned me not to go on the date, but I had not heard. He wouldn't have known if it hadn't been for my tattoo or mouth, as well as the individuals around me who stole what was mine. I found him to be simp and wanted him to understand that even though we were already engaged, I could do anything I wanted and flirt with anybody I wanted. I wanted him to know that marriage couldn't stop me. my fiancé turned out to be anything but a simp. I was a clown for thinking that, and I had suffered the effects of my ego trip severely, and I had learned my lesson when my fiancé exacted his wrath in the most terrible and unexpected ways. What he did will surprise you as it did me, and while it didn't get to me again, it was a stab in the back. I suppose the entire situation should not have surprised me. I should have seen it coming when we started having problems that were entirely the result of my selfish attitude, but I hadn't seen them coming. Let's start with the beginning of my slide. My name is Matty, and I am 27 years old. My fiancé's name is Walter, and he is 28 years old. I believe Walter and I had been pals since high school. My connection with Walter was typical of romantic romances in which the nerd gets the girl. However, in my instance, the girl fumbles. The nerd, who turns out to be incredibly wealthy, I kid you not, LOL. Walter had a crush on me since high school, but couldn't tell me because he was in the quiet and shy group, whereas I was the popular hot girl. I was an attention-seeking white asterisk, quite literally. I know who I am and I would not hide from it. So Walter had a tiny crush on me and kept it a secret throughout high school before confessing to me at a bonfire night hosted by my sorority. That night's celebration had been a fiasco, and the events leading up to my fiancé revealing his affections to me were memorable. And sure, we attended the same college, the University of Cincinnati in Ohio. I had gotten intoxicated and was throwing it down for this random college guy, and before I knew it, I was out of the crowd and away from the music. My fiancé, who was not a partygoer, had come to rescue me from the crowd. Wasn't that sweet? He gave me a glass of water and then stated that he didn't appreciate me hanging around with the partygoers. At that time, I believe he thought he had power over me. He was a year older than me, so he was well versed in college do's and don'ts and was eager to offer me advice. Well, I found him cute, and then he told me he had a crush on me and wanted to take me out on a date. I was inebriated, so I answered, sure, and giggled. That is what I do when I have even a small amount of booze in me. I always remember everything. So, the next day, I went on a date with my fiancé. It was cute, but we didn't make it official at the time. We were just great buddies, and he was a big help. We did not start dating until 2 years ago after I finished college. He finished a year before me and had begun working for a corporation. We dated for a year and got to know his family. I wouldn't call them impoverished, but they weren't middle class, that boundary between the impoverished and middle classes, yes. I hadn't expected that. I had assumed that he was wealthy or at least well off. Anyway, I didn't give it any notice. We were only dating at the time. After all, there was no push, and he had a plan. He had told me that he had a strategy to make money, but even while we were dating, he took care of and supplied for me. He must have liked me, but I had been too self-centered to notice. We dated for a year, and on our 1-year anniversary, I returned to our shared department and opened the door for my engagement party. To be honest, I was a little upset because the objective had been to get affluent first before considering our next step, which was marriage. Wasn't it a fair reason to be outraged that he had just made a proposal to me while all of my friends, who I was better off than, were screaming, "Say yes"? Yes, I could not say no, despite my anger. I would not have said no for starters. I was the first person in my acquaintance group to propose marriage, and I adored my girlfriend. Yes, I did. He was thoughtful, polite, and took good care of me. But then I let my ego stand in the way of a positive outcome, so I said yes, and we started arranging our wedding. That is how Walter became my fiancé. Then I'll explain how I botched everything and lost the person I was intended to spend my life with. I had no idea he'd become wealthy or that he was already wealthy, and learning from his father, my husband never talked much about his parents. He simply informed me that they were still alive and did not want anything to do with him. If I had known he was in line for an inheritance, I would have stayed and lowered my ego a little. Yes, I was a gold digger and all the other names you call a woman who wants a man's money. I wasn't going to stay in a marriage where I wasn't fully provided for, but if I had realized my fiancé had the potential to become as wealthy as I had always imagined, I would not have gone on that date or done anything I did. I would have been more wary of my relative attempting to take my seat, that sly minx. I knew she was up to no good. Tell him about it. I'd want to assist you arrange your wedding, it is your own people that are out to ruin you anyway. I was materialistic and expected my spouse to be the same. No, I was a materialist. He understood how much I enjoyed being taken care of. This included gifts, unplanned getaways, spontaneous day evenings, and weekend shopping excursions. Did my husband happen to know I was plainly proud despite his repeated warnings? I recall one instance when we were dating and went to one of my friend's birthday celebrations together. The occasion was for close friends. I was the only one carrying a Birkin bag worth around $2,000, and I never stayed in one location. Everyone wanted to see my bag, and my fiancé, boyfriend at the time, had persuaded me that if I was prancing around, everyone would notice how much better off I was. He was completely correct, so I could say he knew I was a proud person. I never took no for an answer from him, and I informed him that he had a catch. So if I didn't look well, I could be kidnapped and forced to appear good. I had simply meant the comment as a jest, however, I never imagined it would become my reality. Anyway, our troubles began when things grew difficult, and he wasn't forthright about providing for me as well as the fact that we were getting married. I told him right away that getting engaged while he wasn't rooted was a horrible idea, but he did not listen, and some of you would believe I was only thinking about myself, but I wasn't. I genuinely had a plan for my future with my fiancé. I just wanted him to get rich first or at least be able to provide for me without breaking the bank. I was not working, and he was fine with it. However, what I was afraid about began to manifest despite the fact that I wanted a large wedding and my fiancé appeared to be capable of providing it. But along the road, it was discovered that he couldn't. Was I wrong to be angry over that? I was not wrong to want what I wanted. I wasn't incorrect in pursuing it either. My fiancé began having some snags at work as the bills for the wedding we had been planned began to accumulate. It was so unexpected, yet I had noticed it along the road. He returned home one day and stated that he was under intense scrutiny at work, but there was some mistake with the funds he received for a company buy and blah 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 with every loophole pointing back to him. However, he had not taken any money from the company, but I wasn't listening to any of that. What caught my attention was when this man suggested that we postpone the wedding. Can you imagine it, LOL, after being the first to become engaged among my friends and boasting that my wedding would be the one they would remember for generations, he told me we would have to postpone. I told him straight out that I had no idea where he was going to acquire the money, but we were going through with the wedding as planned. No one was going to bring down my status in front of my pals in the coming weeks. My fiancé refused to go to work and instead spent the entire day surfing the internet on his laptop while snacking on chips. It got on my nerves, so I decided to approach him about it. We had bills to pay, we had to pay for the space, my dress fittings, the cake, food, and decorations, and he was just being casual about things and lounging around the home. That's when I discovered he'd been suspended from work. That was the worst news of my life at the time. I had no idea I was in for a show back then, LOL. My spouse had been suspended from work. That was obviously a major setback to the wedding plans, because who was going to pay for everything? Definitely not me. He promised me that he would obtain a job soon, but I must admit that I did not regard him in the same way afterward. In my eyes, I was better placed than he was because all I had to do was contact my father, and my wedding would be prepared. But I didn't want to rely on him. This was why I wanted my husband to be financially secure before we married to avoid situations like this. In my head, I cancelled the wedding plans because I couldn't marry a man who could lose his job. I lost all respect for my fiancé. I informed him that if he did not want to lose me, he needed to obtain a job, and that had resulted in a major disagreement between us that day. About 2 weeks later, my fiancé started leaving the house again, claiming that he had been vindicated. They discovered that he was not the one siphoning the money. Well, if he had siphoned the money, we would have been 100 times wealthy and could have fled to the Maldives. However, my boyfriend was the goody two-shoes at his office. He stated we could resume wedding planning because he had received a work bonus to compensate for his suspension. He was overjoyed, and I was relieved that he had finally gotten his work back, but I had already done something wrong, and I had no idea what to do. I was wondering what I had done. I began accepting friend requests from men who were unaware I was soon to marry. It had begun with a simple reopening of my Tinder account. I just wanted to see what was going on there, and while reading through gorgeous guys' profiles, I unintentionally swiped right on one, accidentally, LOL. We started conversing. It was just casual flirtation, conversation, and getting to know one another. I knew I was about to get married. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but did I come to a stop? No. My betrothed had not truly claimed me in front of my family and friends in the large throng at my ideal wedding, so I was still a free woman. There wasn't an official ring on it, and what's the harm in a little online flirting? It wasn't like I was ever going to go on a date with the men on Tinder. I really wanted to feel gorgeous and confident about myself. There's this power that women feel when a lot of guys find us sexy and desirable, and let's not get started on the attention. So that's what it was meant to be. While my fiancé went to work and labored, I received attention from various men online who couldn't stop praising me and boosting my ego. I had no idea my demise would be monumental, or that I was damaging myself for the good things that were supposed to come my way. My fiancé's money had run out, and I had only recently paid for a down payment on the wedding hall and phase 1 of my wedding dress fittings. This sparked another argument, and my fiancé had the arrogance to propose that I obtain a job. Could you think he wanted me to obtain a job, and why was it necessary for me to foot the wedding bill or to start taking care of myself after marrying him? I was furious at that statement, and I reminded him that it was he who dropped down on one knee and asked me to marry him, not the other way around. It indicated he was prepared to accept me as a responsible adult and provide and care for me. I informed him that my father could still care for me despite his advanced age. I had been childish with my words. Trust me, I had no idea the consequences of what I was saying back then. Anyway, that appeared to irritate him even more because he assumed I was also in on the marriage, which I was. Do not get me wrong. However, as I previously stated, I was not going to marry someone who would not provide for me. Imagine telling me that I needed to obtain a job after being pampered my entire life. What am I going to do there? Actual work? No, thanks. He was furious, and I was as enraged. As a result, our wedding plans were once again put on hold. I should have noticed the indications from here. You had to be blind not to, and I suppose you were. My fiancé was too, because who would have put up with my toxic baggage up until now? My fiancé was gone for nearly a week, and I made another stupid mistake. One of the men I had been chatting with on Tinder offered me a date, and I accepted. I was upset and angry, and all I wanted was to feel better about myself. My fiancé stopped doing that. He used to take me out on dates and go shopping with me, and he just showed me how much he cared about me in his own unique way. I hadn't felt like that in a while, so I went looking for it. I didn't anticipate my Tinder date to be as hot as fire. I had seen his photos and assumed they had been somewhat changed to resemble a Greek god. I didn't expect the man I'd see on the date to look exactly like his images. He was hot, and I was engaged, but he had no idea how much I liked our date. So, he requested to see me again, and I went on another date with him while I was supposed to be arranging my wedding. I was aware of what I was doing, but I had no idea what the consequences might be. My fiancé refused to care for me, therefore, I wasn't going to give him a second thought. This was what I was thinking. After all, I was young and could attract any guy I wanted if he didn't come clean. He was going to lose me. I didn't desire it, but my ego served as my spokesperson, speaking in place of reasoning in matters of the heart. Obviously, my fiancé had no idea I was going on dates behind his back. At first, he wasn't meant to know, so maybe I could have gotten away with it. I wouldn't have been humiliated, and I'd be enjoying my dream life as his wife. However, that approach did not work for me. Funny enough, I always assumed that things would always go my way. That was the mindset I had as I grew up. I received anything I desired, things had always gone smoothly for me. Men fell at my feet, people went out of their way to help me, simply because they wanted to be on my side. So, I went on the date since my fiancé did not want to contribute to my life. Call me a gold digger, but most of you are doing the same thing. My fiancé returned home after a week and apologized, like he should. He apologized for making me feel like I needed to provide for the wedding, and I forgave him, of course. I even stopped going on dates for a short time as a sign of good faith, and our wedding plans resumed. However, the financial aspect of giving remained a major challenge. Then my cousin had to get involved. Miss Goody Two-Shoes pretended to want to help me, but she was a serpent and a far worse gold digger than I was. It was as if she was sent from the depths of hell to wreck my existence, and that is exactly what she did. My cousin asked if she could move in with me. In truth, she didn't ask. She suddenly showed up at my house one day and said she was coming to help me organize the wedding. She stated she wanted to help me because she knew I didn't have any siblings or sisters to support me, so she decided to help. I couldn't turn her away because she was right on my doorstep, allowing her to observe how I've been struggling to collect money from my fiancé so that I can have my dream wedding. I had no issues about her seeing me at my lowest since she wasn't seeing me, it was my fiancé. My pride remained intact. I wasn't the only one without money because despite my fiancé's decision to stop contributing for my maintenance and upkeep, I had my own means. My fiancé was having difficulty making ends meet, and it served him well to plan a wedding when he wasn't yet financially secure. I was even having second thoughts about it to make matters worse. My cousin needed to be supportive. I recall one incident when we were dining together and discussed the important issues we needed to resolve with wedding planning. I informed my girlfriend that we needed to finish paying for the wedding site because the down payment would no longer be sufficient to secure the location. Instead of supporting me, my cousin encouraged my fiancé and suggested we find a smaller venue. Would you believe it? She wanted to tell me what to do at my own wedding. I should have noticed it earlier. I should have noticed how her gaze never left my fiancé and how she was constantly coddling him. I should have known she was watching and wanted to get her claws on my man. If I'd acted on it, I would not have lost my fiancé to her, yes. I lost my fiancé to my two stealing cousins, that was my fault. I agreed, but he was mine, wasn't she supposed to steer clear? No, she was coming for what was mine. I simply chose not to think that my fiancé could be taken away from me. My cousin began assisting Dad with items for my wedding, but I began to wonder why I had allowed her into my home. It got to the point where I had to tell her to stop acting because I was concerned about my wedding. It was my dream wedding, and I would get anything I desired. She should also avoid discussing topics such as cost reduction if she wants to utter that trash. She was free to get married. What I had told her that day created a schism between us, and she ceased commenting while my fiancé and I were making preparations. She simply assisted me with errands and accompanied me to my dress fittings. I believed I had driven her away with my remarks, yet she stayed and wanted to help organize my wedding. I had no idea she was trying to cover for my fiancé behind my back. I learned the hard way if there was one thing I hadn't realized, it was that my future spouse had a big ego of his own, and that led to our final combat, which ended our engagement. My life changed for the worse for a while. I stopped going on dates because I assumed he was serious about me again. He provided me money to plan my wedding the way I wanted and did not grumble about it. He would buy me a small keepsake when he returned from work and asked if I needed anything. I was content, but karma or whatever must have been unkind. Perhaps my varied choices contributed to my collapse. I would never acknowledge it, but then my fiancé became distant. I believe this was the point at which my cousin began approaching him and providing emotional support as I dealt with his headache. It really is your own people, LOL. My fiancé had become aloof and disconnected, and I didn't interpret it as anything. I didn't realize it until everything had gone wrong because while my boyfriend was being told he deserved more than my two-timing cousin, I had relapsed into my old bad behavior. I ran into the handsome guy I had a date with at the mall. I had mentioned him at the beginning, so I ran into him and was instantly reminded of how gorgeous he was and what I was missing. He inquired about me, said he had missed seeing me, and paid for my entire purchase on the spot. Could you believe I wasn't going to reject him? I let him take me to a restaurant and feed me, then it started again. I knew what I had done was wrong, but I was not legally married to my fiancé. He had asked me to marry him, but I had not answered yes in front of God as a high church official, so there wasn't supposed to be any problem. I went on dates with Mr. Hot Guy behind my fiancé's back and received things in exchange, and he didn't even insist on sex. That's what made it so surreal. He wasn't pressing me for sex, but he wanted me to have all I could possibly want. Of course, I wouldn't give up such a fantastic item, my fiancé be damned, LOL. The ramifications of the remark I made to myself, it was quick. My fiancé had no idea I went on dates, and to be honest, I didn't care if he knew. But he discovered out from my cousin, who had a damaged mouth. I was on a shopping trip with my affair when we came upon my cousin at a clothing store. There was no other way to explain the situation than that I was cheating because my affair had his hand around my waist and was hugging me close to him. This was how I ran into my cousin. Fortunately, she said nothing in front of the guy I was with. Fortunately, she only shook her head and walked away twice. If there was anything like that, she didn't notify my husband on the first day. I suppose she wanted to confirm whether it was true, and I didn't try to be bashful or disguise the fact that I was having an affair with another guy to whom I was not engaged. We ran into her again, and this time she turned on me to my fiancé. This coincided with my fiancé's office party, which allowed employees to invite their significant others. My fiancé had informed me of the party and my affair, as well as of an event to which he wished to accompany me. I had no idea that drama was going to emerge. So my cousin reported me to my fiancé, who was furious. He screamed at me that despite everything he had done for me, I was prancing around as if I didn't have a ring on my finger or was already dating someone when I was going to marry. I freely flirted with men and accepted their gifts. Apparently, he had seen all of the gifts I had been bringing home but had decided to ignore it since he assumed they were for my father. This is when I realized my fiancé had an ego. He started outlining all the things I'd done that he'd chosen to ignore, but only because he loved me and believed we were meant to be. So, he'd overlooked a lot, and I was supposed to apologize to him for taking him for granted. One thing I wasn't paying attention to was my own ego, which had flared up and reared its ugly head. I told him he should consider himself lucky that he was able to put a ring on my finger when I was still clearly a catch. I'm sorry, could you conceive what I should have apologized to him for? I didn't push him to get down on his knees and ask for my hand in marriage. We exchanged such passionate words that my cousin had to withdraw herself from the harshness of the situation. Then I informed my fiancé that I would not be attending his workers' party with him because I was on another date with someone who did not make fun of me and thought I was worthy. That appeared to enrage him more, and he warned me that I should not even consider it. My girlfriend made it obvious that if I left on the date I was talking about, it was the end of our relationship. How could I have assumed that was a joke when he told me? I assumed he was joking about his statements and merely repeating them in anger, and I left. I left on a date with Mr. Hot Guy, and you would not believe the drama. I imagined myself on the date. Mr. Hot Guy had asked me to accompany him to what turned out to be my fiancé's work party, the exact same. Imagine my amazement when the car parked in my fiancé's office building, and Mr. Hot Guy led me into his workplace. My fiancé was the first person my eyes landed on, and I'm grateful that no one at his office knew me and prayed that my fiancé would not cause a scene. But dumb luck, he did not create a spectacle in front of everyone. He casually approached my date and informed him I was engaged to be married. My date quickly dropped my hand as if I had got a virus and proceeded to quarrel with my husband. I'd stepped in close to hear what they were arguing about. Because in some sick twisted way I hoped they were arguing about me. I assumed that everything revolved around me. They had not been arguing about me, however, apparently. Mr. Hot Guy was the one who accused my fiancé of embezzling money. He was the one that caused my fiancé to lose his job the first time. How hilarious was fate! It was very funny, all right. Anyway, I went home from the party before it ended and waited for my future husband to arrive so I could ask forgiveness. He arrived home while I was already sleeping, so I had to visit him the next morning. My cousin had already left the home, at least she had the foresight and decency to do so. So the next morning, I dropped down on my knees and begged my fiancé for forgiveness, explaining that I had no idea what had happened and that I would be the perfect wife and would never longer go on dates. My fiancé said nothing and did not toss me out of the house. I had believed fate was amusing. My fiancé had a sense of humor that would make you laugh out loud. He wrecked me in front of all of my pals. I had foolishly continued with the wedding plan since I assumed that it was back on track because he hadn't pursued me out of the house or anything. I didn't realize I was a big joke. 2 months passed, and our wedding day arrived. I had even used my money to help my father plan the entire thing, and my husband had sat back for 2 months preparing to exact his retribution. I had finished my makeup and hair, put on my dress, and was waiting for the planner to call to inform me that the wedding ceremony had begun so that I could march in with my father. I waited and waited, and when it appeared that no one was coming to call me out, I saw myself in the church, and you won't believe what I saw. My fiancé was kissing my cousin at the altar of my fantasy wedding, which I had funded with my money. He had married my cousin and dumped me at the altar as retaliation for disobeying his warning and going on a date with his rival at work, whom I had not realized was his rival. My companions began to laugh at my discomfort. I was standing in a bridal gown while my fiancé married another woman in front of me. Is there anything worse than that? The weeks following the wedding flew by, and I went to my fiancé's house to demand an explanation only to find my clothing and luggage outside with a message telling me to relocate them or risk losing them. I had to move my belongings back to my father's place. However, a month later, my father was arrested because he owed a large bank loan, and all of his property, including our house, was seized. They were about to charge him in court, and I didn't know what to do. So, I had to go and beg whoever had given him the loan to give us more time to pay it back. My ex-fiancé was found to be responsible for the debt issue. Apparently, my ex-fiancé was the son of one of the bank's board directors. He was the son of the primary decision maker at the bank, and now he's taken over my fiancé. He did not show me any mercy with the loan. So, I had to use my personal funds to bail out my father and pay half of the loan. This was how my life ended up, paying off my father's debt because my ego was too huge, and I pushed away something that was meant to work out well in my life. I was meant to be enjoying the luxuries of my ex-fiancée's wealth, but instead, my cousin had taken my place, all due to my arrogance and foolish decision. I hope you who are proud like me would learn from my experience and not repeat the mistakes I made in my life. I'm still paying off the loan, and my ex-fiancée didn't even pretend we had a connection in the past. I begged my cousin to intervene on my behalf, but she did not help. She probably thought I deserved it, and I did. I discovered my long-distance romance with a rich guy and decided to kick him out. Hello Reddit, I've been a long-time fan of this software. I'm here now to tell you about an extremely terrible tragedy that happened recently. My partner dumped and kicked me out after finding out about my long-distance romance with another guy. First and foremost, before you condemn me, I have evaluated myself and am aware of my wrongdoing. I'm not here to be criticized or to seek comfort or advice. I'm here to share my story and rant. Also, it would be great if someone or some cheater saw my tale and learned from it. Some background information to help you understand where I'm coming from. My name is Haley, and I met my boyfriend Skylar in high school. Skylar was the complete package: blonde hair, blue eyes, a brilliant mind, and football captain. Everyone liked Skylar and wanted to be seen with him. I, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. I was a geek, but not a smart geek. I was one of the dumb people. I wasn't really attractive. I was relentlessly bullied, and as a result, I suffered from low self-esteem, which was exacerbated by my poor academic performance. I even acquired eating problems, which only became worse for me. And then amazingly, Skylar appeared as if from a movie scene in which something unusual puts together the attractive male protagonist and the eccentric geeky romantic interest, except my tale was completely true. Skylar came along because my grades were failing. My mother arranged for Skylar to instruct me. It was great. Sky first acted extremely professionally. He would come after school, help me for about an hour, and then go. Naturally, my mother paid him. However, as time passed, he began to spend time with me more and truly wanted to be my buddy. He wanted to be seen alongside me. He wasn't embarrassed by me. Within a few days of hanging out with Skylar, my reputation grew dramatically. There were no more bullies, name-calling and pranks. Skylar actually cared for me, and he made an effort to protect me. After a few months of hanging together, we started dating. Skylar completely transformed me. He made me start paying care to my beauty since I wanted to look well for myself. He never criticized or commented on my appearance, but years of low self-esteem caused me to overthink everything. I started wearing more makeup, buying finer clothes, and styling them properly. I also started working out and came into excellent shape. In fact, I was 100 times more attractive than before. Years later, I am now 25 years old. Similarly, my boyfriend, or should I say ex-boyfriend, has dumped me. We started living together in college several years ago. All of this backstory is just to give you an idea of what my boyfriend and I went through and how far we've come. Unfortunately, despite Skylar's best efforts, my grades never improved significantly, and honestly, I believe it is due to a lack of focused effort on my part. And after I achieved my ideal body, I became obsessed with preserving it. I put all of my attention and effort into maintaining my beauty, and there was very little effort left for literature. Skylar did his best, and it was only because of it that I graduated from college and high school. I just barely passed. I now regret it. You will realize why later. I had always wanted to be a trophy wife. Perhaps it stems from years of bullying and being neglected by the opposite gender, but I came to like the attention. I wanted to be somebody's trophy wife. I wanted to be a complete stay-at-home mother. I honestly imagined a life in which I could stay at home, relax, and care for the children while my husband worked and provided for us. Now that I think about it, that was a really terrible notion, but I honestly didn't know any better. Skylar was doing his best, he was earning well, but not as much as I desired. I was troubled by it, but Skylar was so well set up that I knew in a few years he'd be earning a lot more money. He also did some freelance work on the side and was in high demand, never running out of clients. Overall, everything was fine. Sky also handled all of the house's bills, as well as my own costs, skincare, clothing, changes, shoes, purses, and of course, he paid for everything when we went out with our friends or alone. I was a very shy and reclusive person in school, but this was due to my low self-esteem and physical looks. After I started taking better care of myself, I became much more social, which Skylar encouraged. Everyone in our buddy group was envious since we had an apparently ideal relationship, especially the girls. They envied the fact that I did not work but was well cared for by my partner. Of course, Skylar and I had disagreements about this, but all I could obtain was a minimal wage job because I had just graduated and had never worked in my life. So, we let it be since I was at home all day while Skylar worked, except when I went out with friends. I became more interested in games, particularly IMVU. I adored IMVU. I relished the fact that I could be anyone on there. However, everyone who has played IMVU is aware that it requires money to enjoy the game. I began to require more money from Sky. I wanted to be completely fabulous both in the game and in real life, which entailed frequent wardrobe changes and the acquisition of fresh, inexpensive items and so forth. Skylar was willing to a certain extent. Sky frequently believed my requests were ridiculous, especially when it came to paying money on IMVU for virtual badges and clothes. While he was willing to give me some money for gaming, he thought a lot of stuff was stupid. He was saving for a house and did not want to squander money on items he deemed superfluous. But I disagreed. I mean, he'd already saved far more than we needed for the down payment on the house, so why couldn't I have some fun with the extra cash? It produced friction between us because while he was all about making wise financial decisions, I just wanted to have some fun, which was where I made a huge mistake. One day, I was playing on IMVU as normal, and I realized that someone had given me some clothes. I was overjoyed because it was something I truly wanted and had on my wish list. I'd been waiting for Sky to give me some money so I could buy it, but he wasn't giving out money like before. He was all about saving for our future, which seemed absurd given how much he had already accumulated. But if I tried to dispute, he would just urge me to get a job if I needed more money for gaming. He made a valid point, which always silenced me. I knew deep down I needed to obtain a job, but I didn't want to, so I snuck into the DMs of the person who gave me the clothes to thank them, and we ended up speaking. Jason was 30 years old, we hit it off instantly and discovered we had a lot in common. It was natural to connect with him, and he was eager to give me more clothes. As I became more involved with Jason outside of IMVU, I spent a lot of time conversing with him. He was a little arrogant, but he kept sending me great goods and money, which helped me forget whatever reservations I had about his personality. Meanwhile, my boyfriend, Skylar, began to notice that I was acting differently. Instead of paying attention to him, I was always on the phone with Jason. Skylar became concerned when he noticed all the things arriving at our door and the increased spending on our bank account. He inquired where all the money was coming from, and I had no idea how to explain. I made up a narrative about freelancing to make it appear like I was contributing to our finances. Skylar didn't believe it, and I could see he didn't trust me, but I clung to my story, using his own recommendation that I get a job against him to justify my lies. As my friendship with Jason developed, so did Skylar's distancing from me. I took solace in Jason's attention and presence, despite the fact that I knew I was hurting Skylar, and I will face the future together. Jason suggested that he'd be prepared to pay me more if we took our relationship to the next level. At first, I was apprehensive of combining money and romance, but it dawned on me that Jason lived several states away, and a long-distance relationship with him felt like an ideal option. It meant I could reap the benefits without having to deal with the complexities of a typical relationship and cheating on Skylar. So, despite my reservations, I consented to go with Jason. Jason and I kept going, and he sent me money frequently. Being naive, I continued to spend it all on frivolous items such as bags, shoes, and clothing, instead of conserving or investing the money. I simply spent it, pursuing the high of possessing things with each purchase. I changed into this glittering, glamorous version of myself, but despite my flashy appearance, I was actually quite inept when it came to finances. I didn't consider saving for the future or anything similar. No, I basically spent it all on things that made me look nice in the moment. Our friends were green with jealousy, believing Skylar was responsible for all of my trendy new stuff. Skylar himself was perplexed by the dramatic shift in my spending patterns, but because I wasn't asking him for much money anymore, he believed it wouldn't hurt anyone, so why argue? Plus, it meant he could save even more money for our future, like purchasing a home, investing, and even saving for rainy days. But here's the deal, while everyone assumed I was having a good time thanks to Skylar's kindness, the reality was a little more complicated. Jason was the one who greased the wheels of my extravagant lifestyle, and while Skylar may have been fine with the scenario, I was skating on thin ice, chasing after luxury without considering the implications. Jason's life appeared to be going well for a while, but then he started being pushy. He suggested flying over to see me, but I wasn't interested. Mind you, we both live in the United States, it's only that we live in different states. Sure, I appreciated Jason's money, but my heart belonged to Skylar. I had known him all my life and adored him. In addition, he looked after me quite well. If it came down to it, I'd choose Skylar over Jason every time. Furthermore, when I compared their appearances, Skylar seemed like a Greek deity while Jason looked like a human. Let's just say he didn't look the part. But it wasn't all about appearances. The notion of lying to Skylar and sneaking away to visit Jason filled me with fear. Skylar was not a fool, he'd see through any lie I attempted to spin in a heartbeat, and he knew all of my friends and family. So, there was no way I could arrange a secret rendezvous without raising suspicion. I kept putting off Jason's visit, making one excuse after another. I told him I was busy with work, even though I didn't work, or that I had family duties to attend to, in order to buy myself more time and keep him from flying down to visit me. My lies, however, had a limited shelf life. My vanity blinded me to the truth, and Skylar's suspicions reached a breaking point. Then it happened. One night, I was sound asleep when Skylar took a dive into my cell phone. He must have sensed something was wrong and decided to investigate. He did not stop there, however, he went through my laptop and even looked into my IMVU account. Skylar is no slouch, he connected the dots between my love of a game and Jason's unexpected gifts and money. Every message I exchanged with Jason was laid out in front of him, revealing the truth that I had been hiding. I can only imagine how much pain he felt right there and how Skylar's mixed emotions, anger, hurt, disbelief, must have been devastating, realizing that the person he trusted the most had been lying to him. Skylar didn't waste any time waiting for me to get up on my own. The next morning, he jolted me awake by dumping a glass of water directly on my face. I almost jumped out of my skin, I definitely screamed my lungs out, confused and soaked. I demanded to know what he was thinking and why he was pulling such a stunt, but he did not even look at me. He didn't say anything in response. Instead, he just ordered me to pack up my belongings and leave. Skylar's unexpected demand confused me at first, but when he finally turned to face me and said those deadly words about knowing about Jason, I felt as if the ground had opened up and swallowed me whole right there. Everything seemed to come crashing down all at once. In a frantic attempt to save the situation, I begged and pleaded with Skylar, stating that I had never physically cheated on him because I had never met Jason in person. But Skylar was having none of it. He saw right through my lame justifications and laid it out plain and simple. I'd been emotionally cheating on him with Jason, collecting money from him while lying to Skylar about our relationship status. That was betrayal, plain and simple, and in his opinion, that was cheating. I tried everything I could think of, but Skylar wouldn't have it. Tears were running down my cheeks as I begged him to listen, but he started packing my belongings as if he were on a mission. He didn't even look at me while he talked, and his words struck me like a ton of bricks. He said I should be grateful that he didn't kick me out the night before. It felt like a hit in the gut, realizing how close I was to losing everything due to my faults. As I watched him pack up my life, I knew that our relationship would never be the same. Skylar did not have any time. After packing up all of my possessions, he flung them out onto the porch with a furious scowl. He threw the door wide open and gestured outside, leaving me little chance to argue. It was evident that he wanted me gone, and he wanted it now. I couldn't disagree with Skylar's harshness. Tears streamed down my cheeks as he ordered me to leave. He made it obvious that either I walked away peacefully or he would have to force me out, but he wouldn't touch me, knowing that things could get worse if I didn't go. Gently, I swallowed my pride and stepped outside, sitting on the porch with all of my belongings, waiting for the Uber. It felt like an eternity. I couldn't help but feel my inquisitive neighbor's gaze, wondering what was going on. Yep, there I stood with my belongings strewn around the porch like a chaotic yard sale, and you best believe the neighbors were intrigued. They couldn't help but look out their windows and strain their necks to see what all the hubbub was about. Honestly, I wouldn't blame them if the roles were reversed, and I noticed something similar happening in my typically peaceful area. I would be nosy too, definitely be one of the first to look out the window and try to see what was going on next door. After what seemed like an age, the Uber arrived, and I quickly loaded my items into the car. Skylar had already closed the door, and there was no goodbye, no final glimpse, just silence as the automobile moved away from the curb. A sense of failure rushed over me. It seemed like every ounce of strength had been taken from my body. I sat in the back seat, feeling lost and completely alone. I wasn't sure where to go from there. I had no plans and no destination in mind. All I knew was that I couldn't stay here, given what had transpired. Skylar would not allow it. So, with a heavy heart, I understood that my only alternative was to return to my parents' place, tail firmly between my legs. Arriving at my parents' place, I felt even more defeated than before. It felt like every ounce of strength had been stolen from my body, leaving me completely tired. I was so out of it that the Uber had to remind me we'd arrived at our location. As I stepped out of the automobile, I was blasted with another strike. Our shared funds were completely depleted. I couldn't even pay my Uber driver. It was a stark reminder of how serious my condition had become. With no other options available, I had to swallow my pride and enter the home to seek my parents for assistance. Skylar controlled our joint account, and every penny in it was properly his. We had separate accounts for his for savings and mine for the money Jason provided me, but those were of no use today. I could not blame Skylar for depleting the joint account. After all, the money was his. He'd always handled our bills and expenses, while I spent Jason's gifts. But now, with nothing left to my name and no way to pay for a ride, I understood how reliant I had gotten on Skylar's generosity. It was humbling to say the least, and it left me feeling more lost and alone than ever. My appearance at my parents' place must have surprised everyone. I could see the amazement on my brothers' and parents' faces when they saw me with all of my possessions. They probably had a million questions running through their heads, but when they noticed the tiredness on my face, they opted to hold off on the interrogations. Instead, my mother wasted no time in preparing something for me to eat. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything to me in that moment. After filling my tummy, I wasted no time and went directly to bed, feeling as if I could sleep for 1,000 years, despite the drama that was whirling around me. I found solace in being back home, surrounded by my family's love and support. Honestly, as I slipped off to sleep, I knew that no matter what occurred next, I wouldn't have to face it alone, and that made me very delighted. When I awoke, I didn't have to explain what had happened to my parents. They assumed I had a quarrel with Skylar and chose to leave. But they were perplexed since they knew we'd never fought like that. However, as I was resting up on some much-needed sleep, Skylar took matters into his own hands and contacted my parents. He spent no time in updating them on the current situation. When my parents attempted to defend me, Skylar abruptly terminated the call, but it was not all. Skylar went a step further and emailed them screenshots of everything, laying out the entire nasty reality for them to view. Waking up to that reality was a stark reminder of how much damage had been done, and I couldn't help but feel ashamed at the notion of my parents seeing me in such a light. My parents were quite disappointed in me. They absolutely adored Skylar. He'd been with me since high school, sticking by me through thick and thin. Skylar even assisted me in dealing with bullies at the time, which was quite helpful to me. So when my parents heard out what had transpired, they didn't hold back for an hour. They scolded me as if there was no tomorrow. It pained knowing I had let them down and messed up with Skylar. Their disappointment hit me like a blow in the belly, leaving me feeling even lower. It was a tough wake-up call, reminding me of the disaster I'd created and the trust I'd destroyed. My parents attempted to find a silver lining in the disaster. They told me I was lucky since I never got personal with Jason and we never met in person. They thought this provided us a chance to repair things. They came up with a plan: wait a few days for Skylar to calm down before staging an intervention. We'd all beg him to give me another chance. As part of the arrangement, I'd vowed to erase my IMVU account and all of my social media. It stung, especially because I had a decent online following, but to be honest, I would have done everything to win Skylar back. While I waited for the proper time to speak with Skylar, my parents advised me to relax and rest. Well, they also encouraged me to continue messaging Skylar, pleading for forgiveness. When I eventually checked my messages, I saw that Skylar had dropped a bomb in our group chat by publishing screenshots. It felt like he had exposed me to everyone. There was amazement all around, but deep down, I realized that some of them were relieved. They'd always been jealous of me, and Skylar was feeling overwhelmed by it all. I decided to leave the group chat and ban all the bogus friends. They were never truly there for me when it mattered. And then I carefully slipped back into bed, seeking relief from the chaos that had overtaken my existence. For a few days, my schedule was rather simple: eat, sleep, and send urgent messages to Skylar, even though he did not respond. After a week, the fact that he hadn't blocked me provided a ray of hope. My parents decided it was time to move, so we went to Skylar's apartment. Unsure whether he'd be there, the first time we went, he wasn't home, so we had to go empty-handed. But this time we had luck on our side. When we arrived, Skylar was already there. It was the first time we'd seen him since the incident. Skylar was fatigued, yet he looked just as gorgeous as ever. Despite my shame and sadness, seeing him there made me fall for him all over again. I regretted my error more than ever. Even though he was exhausted, Skylar was kind to my parents. He welcomed them into his home with open arms. It was difficult to watch him deal with the mess I'd produced, and I wished I could take it all back. But it was also a wake-up call, reminding me of the significance of setting things right. No matter how much my parents pleaded, Skylar would not budge. He flatly refused to give me another chance. I listed all the ways I had let him down. He didn't mince words when he chastised me for not doing my fair share around the house, despite the fact that I was unemployed. It was a hard reality check. Skylar made it clear that forgiveness was not an option after hearing all of my flaws exposed in such detail, and he encouraged me to accept it and move on before things got worse. It stung like hell, but deep down, I knew he was correct. Leaving Skylar's place was difficult. I felt sad and heartbroken, but I tried to soothe myself by remembering that I still had Jason to fall back on. Jason wasn't quite the Prince Charming type that Skylar was, and I didn't love him like I did Skylar, but he was loaded, so I figured I'd employ him until I found someone better. I hadn't responded to his messages throughout the situation with Skylar, but I reached out now. I didn't have to wait long for a response, but it didn't match my expectations. Jason's statement struck me like a ton of bricks. He basically warned me not to message him again and accused me of lying. Skylar had gotten to him, leaving me with nothing and no one to turn to. So, what I'm saying is that cheating is not worth it. Losing Skylar hurts considerably more since he had set us up so wonderfully, and our future looked bright. However, as a result of my actions, I have permanently lost him. It's a heartbreaking reminder that breaching someone's confidence can cost you everything, including the future you once hoped for. Here is the next story. You will be apprehended, her voice warned. I was in the pub, having a casual Friday night game with the gals. There were 5 of us. The 6th had already found her catch before we arrived, a tall blonde man with an unmistakable charm. We knew we wouldn't see her again until Monday morning at work. As I turned slightly to the left, I observed a striking and well-dressed woman. The first word that came to mind was elegant. Her black dress was enticing but subtle, and her jewelry, while obviously expensive, was tasteful rather than excessive. Her blonde hair was shaped into a pixie cut that wonderfully framed her face and gave her a youthful appearance, despite her sophisticated appearance. I found it impossible to determine her age. She did not appear to have had any surgical enhancements, yet the laughter wrinkles on her face indicated years of experience and wisdom. I could only hope to look half as beautiful as she did for her age, which I estimated to be around 50, but what she wanted from me remained a mystery. I apologized. I didn't hide my annoyance in my voice. I said, "You're going to be caught. I've been watching your companion since they walked in the door. Are you preparing for the big night?" She answered, "Yes, I'll wait." "What are you watching us for, and why are we being caught? And who are you exactly?" I was perplexed. She grinned. "My name is Jessica, and you understand exactly what I'm talking about. You and your friends are going to the club, correct? And you've come to get some meal before that. I am right, right? What is your name, honey? Charlotte? Are you a psychic, Jessica?" Jessica chuckled with a pleasant yet slightly arrogant tone. "Not at all, just someone who has been in your shoes before." The bartender put my drink in front of me. They received a big tip as is customary on such evenings. He had to put up with women like my pals all night, and he had earned it. I glanced at Jessica as I took a sip, despite my desire to join my buddies. This was one of the most interesting conversations I've had in a long time, better than listening to Cynthia and Betty try to outdo one another. "And where is it?" Her smile was more predatory than welcoming. "Were you going to cheat on your husband?" "No, that is, how do you say that?" "I adore my spouse," I mumbled. Jessica's smile got a little sadder, and her tone relaxed. "I'm not judging you, Charlotte. I'm trying to help, and I never said you didn't love your hubby. I believe you, so do I, but I continue to cheat on him. Well, I am not going to trade my hubby." "Hi, go to hell. You don't even know me. You know nothing about us." I began to move, but Jessica placed her hand on my wrist. However, it was not a grip but rather a delicate touch. "Please stop, please listen to me. When your group arrived, there were 6 of you. The person with the ring had already gone with the guy to the applause of the rest of the group. The other 2 girls, including you, are also wearing rings. 3 aren't. If I were to guess, one of them is married and has hidden the ring, and 1 or 2 others have divorced. I froze in place. You what's this? Are you a detective following us? No, I'm just a woman, as I previously stated, who has been where you are. I've had pals like yours too, and I've seen bands like yours numerous times throughout the years. Maybe you have not cheated yet, and I bet not. She waved her hand. By the way you keep staring at your ring, the expression on your face when your married friends are discussing about how wild the group becomes. I'm betting they're planning to get laid, and hubby will never know. I looked aside uneasy. As I already stated, honey, I'm not passing judgment. Not really. Without looking back, I spoke. Not really. What is that intended to mean? Everybody has a story. Some are good, some are bad. However, at the moment, it can be difficult to determine who was who. She shifted slightly so that she was totally within my field of vision. I'm trying to help you, Charlotte. Snorting, I asked, how can you help me? Tell me not to cheat? Cynthia said your married friend who is such a spendthrift and cheater. Yes, she said it had no negative impact on their relationship. She believes that whatever he doesn't know will not harm him. Jessica's loud mocking laugh interrupted my sentences. That is absolutely correct, honey, but I assure you that her husband will find out. Your friend is the divorce. What was her name? Betty. I spoke it nearly in a whisper, but then I gathered myself. But she realizes what she'd done. She admitted that she knows what she'd done wrong, and she can keep either of you from being caught, and everything will be okay for her in the end, right? I just stayed quiet. As I previously stated, Charlotte, I have observed numerous groups similar to yours, and while I haven't always seen the results, I know what they're doing and what they're going to ask you to do. One of you will be caught at some point, and the other 3 can keep a secret if 2 people are deceased and there are 6 of you. It is not even taking into account one of them may be praying that you and your husband fail together, then she can select him again, or perhaps he is already cheating on you, and this is his vengeance. I let out a growl. Richard isn't like that. She said in a soothing tone, are you high? I do not. Her hand softly grasped my wrist. People change for various causes, Charlotte: boredom, rage, vengeance, and sadness. They want to depart because they want to get caught, because they believe they need a thrill. Why are you planning to do this? No, why? Jessica shakes her head. I am guessing. How long does it take? You accompany your pals to the dance, perhaps 1 hour. Have you previously cheated on your husband? I look down at my feet. I understand. We were merely dancing too close when I was a little inebriated. One of them attempted to kiss me. I stopped him. There was no hyperbole. Her finger lifted my chin. But you were planning to do it tonight, perhaps? Cynthia and Betty made it look normal, as if it were just another, as if it didn't matter to us, like going to the spa or the gym, except that his ego would not tolerate Jessica adding to my opinions. If he truly cared for you, he would allow you to do this, she signed and included, idiots. Hello, not you, Charlotte. Although perhaps, but you're not quite as foolish as them. At the very least, you have not committed an irreversible act. You still have time. Jessica remarked, smiling. I couldn't help making a joke, so a revealed cheater is now attempting to talk me out of breaking my vows. You received yours, and it destroyed your marriage. Now you're assisting young ladies to escape the same tragedy? Jessica smiled almost devilishly. No, not at all. I mean, maybe, but I cheated on my spouse hundreds of times over our 23-year marriage. I'd probably still be doing it if my beloved Donald hadn't died, and I would always be caught. Here's how I can help you, Charlotte. If you want to cheat, I can teach you everything I know, and if you follow my advice, you will never be caught unless you are extremely unlucky. What? Jessica removed her purse off the stool. There's a 24-hour diner across the street. I'd like to get some coffee and maybe some food if you'll join me after telling your pals you'll be back in around 1 hour. I'll give you my tale, and you'll learn everything you need to know to run such businesses successfully, regardless of how much money you have. Are you serious? I am serious. A wizard never divulges his tricks, but maybe it's time for me to take on an apprentice. She added, See, I have my doubts. I'm not asking you to get into the car with me. We're just going out to a public area to drink coffee, share fries, which I'll pay for, and converse. And then, once we're done, you can do whatever you want with what you've learned. Worst case scenario, you'll just tell your friends about the strange woman you met tonight. She continued, I see why I trailed off. Jessica turned to leave but said, I will come nonetheless. This area was completely desolate early on, and your pal left with the only guy I had my eye on. If you join, great. If not, I will come regardless, only a bit longer. I'm going to waste time getting up the stairs because I'm very certain I'll let the basket of fries go all the way. With these remarks, she departed. What the hell happened? On the one hand, she was correct, everything the girls did was dangerous, even I realized this. Perhaps I needed someone who understood this to get me to listen to what I was already saying to myself. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to cheat. My behavior over the last few weeks had been the reverse. I adored Richard, my developing desire to be with other males did not alter this. At least for me, I am sure he dreamed about other women, and I didn't go beyond that. So that's what Cynthia, Betty, and the others told me, even though deep down I knew I'd be furious if I saw Richard doing the same thing I'd done to other men. But if I do decide to pursue it, why wouldn't I want to be successful? If Jessica was telling the truth, over the span of 2 decades, hundreds of men found themselves in her arms without her husband's knowledge. Why should males listen to what she says, even if she was lying? As she admitted, it may make for an amusing story. I told the girls that I was going for a walk outdoors before leaving and would be returning shortly. They were already inebriated, so Cynthia merely said, You better come back before we leave without you and get all the good guys. They then returned to the group game of Mary/Love/Kill, this time discussing the boys from the office. I understood I wanted to hear other people's perspectives before one of these jerks dismissed or divorced me. The diner was one of those establishments where the neon letters Diner blazed over the entryway with no indication of the actual name. It appeared to be from any era since the 1940s, as evidenced by its decor. It felt like it had been snatched from another period. All of the things, including the tables, chairs, and bar, appeared to be inexpensive yet extremely durable. After a night of dancing, the girlfriends and I would frequently find ourselves here for those of us who hadn't picked up any guys. The meal was average but inexpensive, greasy, and plentiful. When I stepped in, Jessica was holding a mug and looked into the distance. When I approached the table, she blinked in uncertainty and grinned broadly. Hey, I wasn't sure if you were coming or not. I'm glad you're here. I sat in the office opposite her. Maybe I should have checked my schedule, but I believe it would be more entertaining than listening to Cynthia and the other girls spin in this whirlwind all evening. She giggled. Yeah, it doesn't seem that difficult. I shrugged. Perhaps, but if you have anything intriguing to tell me, why not? Jessica nodded, thinking, I can try, but I apologize. Could you please give some information about yourself first? Not about your entire existence, just what you do, how long have you been married, etc. I want to make sure you understand what I'm saying. It will be fascinating and valuable to you. I do not want to waste our time. I see, so I'm 27, my spouse and I met around the conclusion of my freshman year in college. I was studying history, but I decided I didn't want to be a teacher, so I currently work as an administrative assistant. Richard and I began dating at the beginning of our senior year, and we have now been married for 5 years. Are you happy with your marriage in general? I nodded slowly. Yes, I think so. I don't have any severe complaints overall. He makes me happy. Of course, I'd like him to pick up after himself and not leave socks on the floor next to the bed each night, but he evidently dislikes my viewing so much reality television. Jessica smiled. That is fair enough. How about your intimate life? I felt uneasy, so, in general, everything is okay, fine. She lifted her eyebrow. Yes, everything is mostly fine, if not as excellent as it was at first. Overall, I grind, he's still doing a terrific job, and he says I'm the finest among the women. That's nice. Are you the best thing he has ever tasted, something along those lines? Yes, now, or maybe it happened 2 or 3 years ago. At first, I had to teach him what I liked, but he caught it quickly. Everything went well after he figured it out, but as I mentioned, recently it's a little worse. Dan raised his eyebrow again. No, I would not go that far. I was hunting for the correct word. I'm thinking comfortable, perhaps. I love it, and it's still good though. I can't recall when this is the final time we attempted something new in bed. Jessica nodded wisely. I noticed no severe issues. A happy marriage is already a positive thing, but why are you considering cheating on Richard? Fortunately, before I could react, the waitress delivered the fries and poured me a cup of coffee. I used this time to think about how to word my response. I did not come here to attack her. I came here to hear her story. No, I allow myself to be tempted, but never. I do not want to cheat on Richard. I do not intend to date anyone else. I just crave excitement. They put hot potatoes into my mouth, and when I realized it was too hot, I quickly rinsed it down with water. About the solo existence, she took a sip of coffee, and her lipstick left a light stain on the cup's edge. Yes, I discovered my mouth, to be probably free and appealing. I don't want to betray Richard, but when we started talking about children and buying a house, I moaned. I was wondering if it was too early to marry. Should I continue playing this game? Would you like to see if there is anybody better? No, I boldly dipped the next piece of fries into the ketchup and let it to cool. This time no. I love him, I really do. He's a great guy, and I want to spend the rest of my life with him, and I'm very certain I don't want to hurt him. But I do not know. I just feel. I imagine chewing potatoes drenched in ketchup. Jessica waited until I finished. I'd like to conclude this chapter of our marriage and get back to him, without harming Richard, not even if there was a method to do it without cheating. This would be fantastic. I would do my best though, but I shrugged. Her stare pierced mine, but the urge to change is growing, particularly among people with whom you communicate, yes. I hate to confess that, but I do not want to, but I do understand. I know I'm still gorgeous. There were numerous occasions in the club when I could have moved on with the boys, but I didn't. My gaze dropped on my hands, and I enjoy the feeling of being wanted. So I returned with the anxiety that one day I will not be attractive enough. She smiled, she was friendly, and placed her hand on mine. I understand, trust me, I understand, and I believe I can help you. My hand shot up. Cheat? I'm not sure. Jessica stroked my palm before removing hers as she leaned against the back of the chair. Not necessarily. I will tell you my story. I will tell you why and how I did it, and if you want more information, I'll stay here and talk to you as long as you need. It is rare for me to get the opportunity to open out to anyone, and you seem like an excellent conversationalist. She giggled when she noticed my look. I'm not implying that you'll cheat, that you have the mark of the beast or anything else that you're terrified of. She took a slice of French fries and continued speaking. How did she speak with her mouthful so gracefully? You were young, beautiful, and intelligent enough to realize that what you were doing was not working. I mean, everything is going on with your marriage and your friendship with Cynthia, right, and Betty. I nodded. You have an unexplained drive that is pulling you in a route you may or may not wish to go, Jessica signed, a little melancholy to be honest. You do not have children, and your marriage did not survive long. You have more power to affect things than you realize. I don't want to seem pessimistic, but quitting a marriage is a possibility. One of those, well, I do not think so. Enough courage, one more peace, and some happier thoughts, but let's not talk about that right now. Would you still like to hear my story? I nodded. It won't hurt to listen, right? Yes, I understand. The dignified elderly lady smiled warmly at me. I was confident that a true fairy tale awaited me. Then I'll start at the beginning, maybe a bit later. You do not need to know about my early days, except that my home life was fairly ordinary, average, primarily middle class, middle America, and ordinary contentment. If my parents had 2.5 children, they would probably have remained that way. But I was no average girl. I progressed from a dumb, big-headed child to a clumsy, ugly duckling. She was always smart, perhaps too smart for her own good. I was a bookish and caustic little girl. Then, during high school, I changed. The ugly duckling transformed into a swan. It wasn't just about my appearance, however. Puberty had its own changes. No, it was my intelligence that enabled me to fully flourish. An inexpensive gift is simply a great thing without proper wrapping, but when properly packaged, it is presented merely in tempting and seductive, glittering lights hinting at the contents inside, and this is where real desire emerges. Think about it. On Christmas Day, a child opens presents and plays with toys for a few hours, perhaps a day or two, and then they are forgotten. But what happens a month later when they are still beneath the tree? How often do they shake, probe, and guess based on size, shape, and weight, what's inside? A month of anticipation culminates in several hours of excitement as gifts are opened, and what happens next? I nodded in agreement, but within, I was unhappy. So you developed your strategy, make oneself beautiful. I learned cosmetics and fashion. Is this true? She laughed. Yes, I do understand. It may sound insignificant, but you must understand. Let me ask, have you always been the stunning young woman sitting across from me? I felt my cheeks flush. I don't think I could go that far, but I've never considered myself ugly. I might have had a difficult period, though, but you have no idea what it's like to be invisible or even loathed by your peers, only to suddenly become a source of longing for some and derision for others. Jessica enthusiastically popped the hot meal into her mouth, enjoying both the taste and her story. I truly did, and it was at that point that I discovered my first and deepest love, to be desired. Being the object of desire has always been important to me. Intimacy is enjoyable, but it is also similar to opening a gift at Christmas. It's the climax, a surge of excitement that overshadows all else. I had a drink of water. I see. Yes, I get it. However, this does not fully explain why, young friend, I'm merely setting the scene with my disappointment. If you want, I can build a wish. So I started dating in high school, lost my virginity at prom when half a dozen of the hottest boys in school asked, and then burst into tears. College was the first time I attempted to be absolutely monogamous. Jessica sighed. Her enthusiasm, which had animated her, seemed to fade as the air left her lips. Then I offended a few good guys. She wrecked her reputation. I know there was one guy who truly loved me, and I loved him back. I mean, I really loved him, but She reached for a glass of Coke as if suddenly lost in meditation. That evening, I witnessed for the first time how the showman's mask slipped off her. My husband was the love of my life, but I believe Jeremy could have been if I hadn't mistreated him so severely. I didn't even look at the old lady with bitterness. I didn't experience those moments of deception back then. In truth, I wasn't particularly good at it. Jeremy did not catch me, and he did not have to. He only needed to open his eyes, but he didn't. Why did you betray him? Jessica lowered her glance toward the table. That's the question, right? Why did I betray him, my hubby, and these beautiful dudes? When she returned my gaze, sorrow flashed across her eyes, and her smile was strained. Because I am an addict. Do you mean bed addiction? She laughed. No, I am not a sex addict, though I have tried. Jessica sighed. I am getting ahead of myself. The nature of addiction is that you refuse to acknowledge it. Nobody wants to believe it, whether it's beer, food, drugs, or gambling. The excuses vary but are similar. It's just one drink, which is very similar to we simply danced, and non-addicts can drink beer or dance closely, which is fine. But for an addict, it's the start of doom. Then we manufacture excuses when things go wrong. It's a difficult day, so I drank a bottle of vodka. It's my birthday, which means I can eat a lot of cake. Jessica's expression tightened into a scowl. We are already on the edge of breaking up, and I have not yet told him all of these arguments for unintentional behaviors are actual actions. She smiles warmly as she returns to the spotlight. I wasn't aware at the time that it was an addiction. I thought I was just having fun, but I was tormented by the conflicting feelings of wanting to be alone and the absolute assurance that things would be different this time, that this time I discovered the perfect guy, and the prior ones were merely childish mistakes. However, I eventually gave up pretending and admitted that I had made a mistake, although I didn't realize it was an addiction and assumed I was just pretending. I decided to be unmarried until I was 28. Jessica's smile was more than just polite, it was genuine enjoyment the present when she talked, her eyes twinkled. Then I met Donald. I was a sales representative for a pharmaceutical firm and continued to work in that sector, and he was a doctor. That man was incredible. His appeal was more than just his appearance, it was his presence, the warmth in his voice, his demeanor, and his ability to be both natural and clever while still being hilarious. He was definitely the best lover I'd ever had from the start. He has been regarded as one of the greatest of all time. I had never been as amazed by him as I was now. Even with Jeremy, I fell in love with him quite quickly. That is why I pushed him away for so long. Regardless, all his perseverance, he hired me, but he did not depart looking back. I see that this is how I was able to convince myself that everything was going to be all right, that we can conquer all obstacles. No guy, nobody before or since, has paid me as much attention as Donald, even when we were dating, engaged, or married for the first time. I felt no desire for anything else. Someone else was following me, but you cheated on him. But I had cheated on him. She raised her glass, and the waiter came over to refill it. He stopped following me, despite the fact that we married only a few years ago. I do not blame him, it's impossible to maintain such intensity indefinitely, and I adored him so much. I tried to resist for as long as I could, but I couldn't scratch this little itch in the back of my head. He kissed me, invited me to supper or dancing, and Jessica seemed to stare at the ceiling. Do you know what methadone is? Here it is, so this is for heroin addicts, correct? Help them quit smoking, right? It is a mild opioid that has some of the same effects as heroin but is not addictive or hazardous. It is effective, but she chuckled, you'd be shocked at how many heroin junkies despise it, whether they are retrieved or not. This is so close to what their body is telling them it requires, but it's not enough. If people stop taking methadone without making other significant adjustments in their lives, they are likely to relapse. Some people simply continue using it for the rest of their lives, replacing one addiction with another. In reality, most recovered addicts do this, replace one habit with another. This is one of the reasons why so many heavy smokers and coffee drinkers attend AA meetings. Even celebrities with unlimited resources experience this. Remember Johnny Cash? He really immersed himself in religion. Robert Downey Jr. became a fitness fanatic. Have you watched the film Trainspotting? No, great film. It starred an extremely young Ewan McGregor. He and his mates, all former drug addicts from Edinburgh, are playing football, baseball, or whatever, against another bunch of guys at the start of the film. And these guys were actual former drug users who assisted the writer with his research. They later became football aficionados after overcoming their addiction. They developed another passion, but it did not appear to kill them. I raised my hand. Sorry, but what are we discussing? I assumed you were talking about Jessica. She waved her hand. Yeah, I am getting there. It's about how he cheated and how it slipped by me, but first, you should understand why I did it. Things influenced how I accomplished things. Do you understand? My face conveyed full misunderstanding. She signed, so methadone, Donald's addiction, after our marriage was similar to mine. Methadone for a few years, it was sufficient to keep me clean but not to my satisfaction. Then it was gone. In other ways, it was even worse. Take another deep breath. I cheated on him for the first time when she was barely 3 years married. I was in a bar in another city, seeing an old acquaintance when people approached me again, and I was free, and she shook her head as if giving the recovered alcoholic a bottle of vodka. I danced and flirted despite knowing what a poor idea that was. This guy wanted me so badly I could practically feel it on him, and allowed him to pursue me, knowing how deadly it was, how it would end, and how much I hated myself while doing it. He touched me on the dance floor, and I allowed him. We discovered a gloomy corner. A few hours later, I returned to my hotel room exhausted and euphoric. She frowned inside, and the emotion is the lowest I've ever experienced. I climbed into the shower, still in my outfit, and cried for about an hour, wanting to die before Donald met me. Jessica sat calmly for a moment, staring into her cup, as if she knew the answers there. She didn't glance up while telling her story. I considered telling him, but I knew my spouse, it'll kill him. He loved me so much, even after I informed him about my history. I didn't realize how serious my requirements were at the time when I was younger. I felt I was just an asshole, and that I had finally found someone who could transform me into an honest lady. Good. She glanced at me when I returned. I developed feelings for Donald, like I had always done since I adored him. It made things easier. He had no suspicions, and I tried not to give him reason to disbelieve me. Then I refrained for a time. This continued for several months, then the yearning reappeared. In the end, I needed to go for work, and Jessica shrugged. It was comforting to believe that I could be a good person, at least for a while. I just made a mistake. This has been the situation for the majority of my life. I traveled frequently for work, so whenever the urge arose, I found someone to meet with. Never be with the same person twice. How? Not even at the same bar twice if you can avoid it. Always use a condom and be cautious not to get caught. But I never did, never. My doubts were clear in my voice. I'll admit that it felt odd at first. I made the mistake of contacting an idiot who attempted to seduce me when I was speaking with my spouse. When I phoned Donald back, I hung up, let him go, and then explained that we were having communication issues at the hotel. I always disliked it when people spoke negatively about him, but after that, guys who did not appreciate him were off the table for me. She chuckled. You've seen my expression. I didn't respect him more than once, you know. It was always disrespectful. I recognized that he deserved a better woman. I simply couldn't leave him. Jessica gazed outside the window. I believe I was a relationship junkie. You keep referring to yourself as a drug addict. Honestly, It is, I struggle to find words that won't offend her. That sounds like utter nonsense. Yes, I understand, and this is frequently the case with these things. When I was trying to be cured amidst all of the changes, I went to an addiction group, like AA only. She waved her hand, and while I discovered that I did not quite meet the standards, I also discovered that there were a lot of folks there who, let's say, got there after being caught with someone they shouldn't have been with, and addiction became a successful strategy for them. But I am aware that I have an addiction or compulsion, and I can prove it. Now let me tell you the rest of my story. She took another bite of the potato, before frowning and pushing the basket towards me. I need to quit. The drug addict admits that she let out a quick laugh. Jessica leaned forward. So that was one time I nearly got caught. She took a time to swallow, and then there was this episode in which I was raped by some jerk. My God, the elderly woman shrugged. It was dreadful. And I am not making excuses for this guy. If I saw him today, I would shoot him for his actions. I obtained my concealed carry license, but I went to bars and invited others back to my hotel. Eventually, I ran into someone who refused to accept it. I attempted to touch her hand. She grinned and moved away. It was a long time ago, long before children. She started approximately 20 years ago. I recall how concerned I was about having to hide all of the evidence from Donald and keep him at a distance until I could be tested when I got a yeast infection. My spouse simply checked on me to ensure that everything was well, but because to the deadline, I was able to get tested for practically everything. We remained out of danger. I had to undergo tests similar to those required of a professional actress, but it was required. Suddenly a fortress appeared. You were chatting about your kids. Is there a possibility? No. Jessica's voice sounded louder than she clearly intended. A few individuals looked at us. Did it fall again? No. There is no prospect of that happening. When we chose to have children, I cancelled the trip shortly before we planned to begin and stopped taking the tablets when I returned. Thank God, Donald was so gutsy, and it only took us a month each time she beat her lip. I was worried. However, I was familiar with algebra, the birth dates of the children and everything else that was supposed to be Donald's, but I was paranoid about it. I'd have to confess if one of them hadn't, that was him. I could not do this to him. So I participated in a job-related genetic testing program that had nothing to do with employment. Thankfully the paranoia was just that, and everything was well. Did you cheat during your pregnancy? Nope. This word conveyed fake joy. Donald adored me at the moment, which made the chase simpler. She grinned her dreamy grin far away and warm indicated that she was lost in good recollections. It was such a great time when I was pregnant, and the kids were so young. I'm not sure why, but there is something about kids. Maybe they were exhausted, or maybe they needed me all the time, but there was an even stronger bond than the affection for Donald following the birth of my oldest son. I wondered for a time if it was the knowledge that there was something more than just me or my marriage that finally made me a better, more deserving person. Jessica remained silent for a minute, staring at her nearly empty cup. Her voice shook slightly when she spoke again. But this is not true. She met my gaze, and the fake smile that had before concealed her pain was no longer present. I felt the itch return when my son started kindergarten, and while it went gone after my daughter was born. That was all for 6 years of my 20-year marriage. I was a loyal wife. But what else am I? She shakes her head. You mentioned you were trying to stop. She nodded, took a deep breath, and attempted to tighten the mask. Yes, I tried several things. Therapy, of course. Counseling for sexual addiction, religion, and athletics. God, that was a mistake. Have you ever seen how gymnasts look at even a somewhat pretty woman? I even attempted to gain weight for a bit. I hoped that if I were less desirable, I would not be chased as much. I suspected it was a supply issue rather than a demand issue. It was not. I was simply sought by less intriguing males, so I was dissatisfied in another manner. I started doing this. I couldn't do anything about it. This small amount of fun seemed to brighten her mood. Anyway, I made a decision around 10 years into my marriage. Initially, it was an addiction, even if it wasn't listed in the DSM. This is true for many illnesses and for a variety of reasons. Second, I couldn't control it, or at least I couldn't figure out how to regulate it. Third, I needed to find a strategy to avoid letting it wreck my life. I began reading about damage reduction as an approach. That is, rather than trying to kick the habit cold turkey, try to mitigate its effects. I recall reading a news story about a woman who was a successful company owner and mother but struggled with heroin addiction for almost 20 years. She managed to deal with her high, and the only reason she got caught was when she accidentally captured drug traffickers while meeting with her dealer. She grinned, not exactly a hero of the ages. I figured that if she could do it for decades, I could too, and I did it. Donald never found out. I don't think he realized I was so diligent. I'm not sure what kind of finish you had. What if you remained like this when you retired and were unable to travel as much? Not really. I just kept dancing, hoping the music never ended. I had a vague hope that menopause would alter my brain chemistry sufficiently to cure me, but it did not. Brain chemistry, there's a reason why for practically anything, including smoking, drugs, and alcohol, the success rate for those who quit smoking is around 5%. People are not unwilling to quit smoking, it's that they can't. She raised an eyebrow at my skeptical attitude. You don't trust me? No, that is not the point. Jessica glanced to someone on the other side of the diner and whispered, "This guy probably weighs 400, maybe 500 pounds. Do you believe he desires this, or does he not know how to lose weight? I guarantee that he knows more about diet than you or I will ever know. And he eats a slice of pie, which I doubt he enjoys. He sits alone at a diner and eats. He doesn't want to deal with hunger, something he doesn't understand or want. Not true hunger, not because he is hungry, but because a slight flow of chemicals in his brain is insufficient to make him give up. This is for everyone who is attempting to quit smoking, drinking, or injecting drugs, or at least I was. She gazed out the diner window again, her eyes are watering. Donald's death caused me to go off the rails for a bit. The itching got considerably worse. I hadn't realized how much his love and devotion let me function normally. For a month following his death, I sat in a pub expecting to be harassed every night. For the next 6 months, I brought someone new with me, sometimes more than one, but not in our bed. She sniffled and wiped her eyes. I could not do it. It was still our bed, even when he wasn't present. I could not do it. I allowed myself to act in different ways. I stopped taking proper care of my health. I began drinking more, being irresponsible about safe partnerships. These are all self-destructive behaviors. I wanted to die and be with him again. Finally, a friend persuaded me to visit the doctor. In fact, several recommended semaglutide, a medicine approved by the FDA several years ago. Have you heard about it? Yes. Is it an injection, and it produces weight loss? Correct, and it occurred. My weight has returned to normal, and I am no longer at risk of developing diabetes. She had a sip of coffee. It also cured my addiction. What? Yeah, I hadn't realized it at first. I mean, it didn't work immediately. It took a couple of weeks to really get going, but even after the first injection, the itching subsided, and after a few weeks, it just went away. My need remained, but I didn't feel the same terrible desire that had before consumed me. At first, I attributed it to my friend's assistance in dealing with Damon's death, therapies, and everything, but when I eventually obtained a clean bill of health from the doctor, I stopped taking injections. My God, she groaned, I found myself back there as crazy as ever. What did you do? As I already stated, I work in pharmaceutical sales. I know all the strategies for getting low-cost medications and uncomplicated prescriptions, so I started doing everything myself as soon as I knew what had transpired, unlike before, the itching subsided. A few months later, I began seeing articles in industry publications about how semaglutide reduced a variety of addictive and compulsive behaviors. Alcohol and tobacco usage were examined in different groups, binge eating, even nail biting. Damn, that her cheeks were glistening with tears. Do you know how painful this is? My love for my husband was not sufficient. My love of children was nearly immaterial. How come my own sense of self-preservation did not help? No, I needed aid, a weekly dose of medication to keep my legs closed. But it was already too late. My Donald is gone, and I will never see him again. I almost stopped taking this awful drug. I wanted to die. I really wanted it during death by drunkenness. It would be awful to see that on a death certificate. She shakes her head. I couldn't do this to my kids. They had already lost a parent, and then my first grandchild was born. I was not the wife that my husband deserved, and I actually felt like, but I was going to be the best darn grandmother the world had ever seen. I chuckled, as did she, but only for a brief period. Then she became quite serious. Here is my if you want I can explain how to cheat on your husband. It's simple to accomplish. Any idiot can do it. It's not that difficult to avoid getting caught, especially if you only plan to do it once. Go someplace else. Hang out in a pub that is not your hotel bar. If you want to continue this, take them to a CD motel that pays by the hour and make love. Get a job that demands you to travel extensively. Follow the same rules as before, but this time you'll have twice the enjoyment. Make sure your money is on a separate credit card that your husband will never see. Be prepared to lie to his face always. Always be prepared and always use condoms. And don't forget to bring a gun like I did, in case someone tries to rape you. Never rely on someone. Create a second existence that separates you from your loved ones. Avoid real friendship. Never drink unless you are alone. God knows what you can say. There is more to come, but you get the point, right? I nodded, feeling slightly nauseated. Yes, once a traitor, always a traitor is partly nonsense, half true. Do you believe this relates to you? I do not know. I exhaled. What shall I do? What should I do with my friends Richard and everything? She took a big breath and exhaled slowly. I can't say it properly, but something is wrong, and you need to figure it out with him. Go to therapy. Take a vacation with whips and chains. I laughed, but whatever you do, put those awful friends under the bus. At least with him, you have control over what you tell him. However, I believe you should be fully honest, but blame them. I promise he would rather blame them than believe you did this on your own. If necessary, keep your distance from them. I nodded. Yes, okay, right. Thank you. Thank you, Charlotte. Good luck. Jessica stood up, smiling, and threw a teacup on the table. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going back to the bar to do my makeup and see if the food has improved since we last visited. Months have passed, but I still have needs. Laughing, she turned, walked out the door, and waved to the window as she passed. I lingered for a while longer, munching on cold French fries and wondering, Jesus, how close was I to being Jessica? I am not a fraud. I adore my spouse. What was I even thinking? I quickly jumped up and almost raced to my car. I needed to go home and tell my husband everything. My eyes welled up with tears as I drove, grieving for myself and for that lovely but shattered woman who rescued me from myself and so-called friends who were about to betray me. Richard at home leaped out of his chair when he noticed my condition. How could I have thought I'd injure him or both of us? He pulled me up and listened to my incoherent account about what I had done briefly, and the old woman who intervened. His expression got more serious, and when he finally spoke, his first words were, "I love you. Thank you for informing me. I'm angry. We will go through this together." I sobbed on his shoulder while he took me to our bed. We laid in our arms as if we were in love for the first time, alternating between soft caresses and mad, desperate passion. I needed him. I needed him more than anything, and he instilled in me the same passion. We won't forget this again. Then, while the love of my life slept beside me, I lay awake. I am not a believer, but that night, I needed to believe. there was an explanation for Jessica's problems. I needed someone to thank since her voice in that bar helped rescue my marriage. I silently prayed for her and thanked God for bringing her to me. I begged him to care for her and her family, ending by asking him to spare her when the time came. May we all be granted mercy that we do not deserve. I got mine that evening. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, write a comment below with your thoughts on what transpired. Take care.